My name is Teresa Clark. I'm 38 years old, and I've always believed that if you build your life carefully enough, nothing really falls apart without warning. Not overnight, not without signs. I work as a regional operations manager for a logistics company in Phoenix. My life runs on structure: early mornings, performance calls, spreadsheets, crisis management when something breaks at a warehouse. I don't improvise. I plan, I document, I verify. Chaos doesn't survive long around me. Or at least, that's what I used to think. My boyfriend, Marcus Hale, is 35, charismatic in a way that never feels forced. He doesn't try to take over a room, but somehow people still orbit around him. He works in event coordination, constantly moving, constantly social, always surrounded by energy that I never quite needed. We had been together for 9 years, living together for 7. No kids, a house in the suburbs, shared finances, shared routines, a life that felt stable, predictable, safe. 8 months ago, Marcus got serious about fitness, hired a personal trainer named Elena. From what he told me, she was 29, building her brand, ambitious, driven. He trained with her 3 times a week. I didn't question it. I don't question things that don't give me a reason to. Last Tuesday, I got home early. One of my afternoon calls got canceled, and for once, the day opened up in a way I didn't expect. I decided to pick up dinner from the Thai place Marcus likes. Thought it might be a small surprise. He wasn't home yet. I went upstairs to change and realized I couldn't find my wireless headphones. I use them for late-night reports, sometimes at the gym. I remembered tossing them into his gym bag over the weekend when we cleaned out the car after a hike. His bag was on the bench in the laundry room. I unzipped it, expecting to find them right on top. They weren't there. There was a smaller inner pocket I didn't recognize. I hesitated for a second, just long enough to register that I had never seen him use it before. Then I opened it and found a phone. Not an old one. Not something forgotten or broken. It was charged, powered on, face down, no case. I just stood there, holding it, trying to make sense of something that didn't fit into any pattern I understood. We didn't have separate phones. No backup devices. No reason for this to exist. I remember thinking there has to be an explanation. Work, a friend, something temporary. Then the screen lit up. A notification banner slid across the top. Elena. A heart emoji next to her name. Miss you already. Something dropped inside me. Not emotionally. Physically. Like missing a step in the dark. I flipped the phone over. No passcode. That detail told me more than anything else. If it were harmless, it wouldn't be hidden. If it were professional, it wouldn't be secret. I unlocked it. There were 847 messages in that thread. 847. I opened the conversation and read exactly 3 before I had to sit down. The first was from her, talking about how she could still feel his hands on her waist. The second was from him, telling her he loved the way she looked at him when they were alone. The third was a photo. Marcus, standing in our guest bathroom, wearing the shirt I bought him last Christmas. That was enough to make me feel sick. But I didn't stop. If this was going to dismantle my life, I wasn't going to do it halfway. I sat at the kitchen table with that phone in my hands and read every single message. Not skimming, not jumping around. From the very beginning. Because I didn't want fragments. I wanted the full timeline. If I was going to make a decision that ended 9 years of my life, I wasn't doing it based on 3 messages and a spike of adrenaline. I read all 847. I did not rush through it. That's the part people don't understand when I tell this story. They expect anger, rage, a slammed phone, a confrontation before the truth has time to settle into something solid. But that's not how I work. I read everything. Slowly, carefully. Like I was auditing a system that had already failed, but I still needed to understand exactly where and how the breach happened. The thread started 6 months ago. At the beginning, it looked harmless. Professional. Scheduling sessions, adjusting times, payment confirmations. Marcus asking if he could move a session because of work. Elena responding with availability windows and quick, polite replies. If I had only seen that part, I wouldn't have thought twice. But tone doesn't shift all at once. It erodes, message by message. By the end of the first month, there were jokes. Small ones, harmless on the surface. Elena teasing him about how hard he pushed himself during workouts. Marcus telling her she was his favorite part of the week. That was the first crack. Because I had heard that phrase before, just not directed at someone else. By month 2, the messages became personal. Inside jokes that didn't belong to me. Comments about how I wouldn't understand his fitness goals. Complaints about how I was too structured. Too predictable. I remember pausing there, not because it surprised me, but because it explained something I hadn't realized needed explaining. He had been building a narrative, and she had been feeding it. "You deserve someone who matches your energy," she told him at one point. "Someone who actually sees you," he responded with, "Yeah, I don't think she ever really did." I sat there for a long time after that message, not crying, not reacting, just recalibrating, because I had spent years believing that stability was something we both valued. And somewhere along the way, he had started treating it like a flaw. By month 3, the tone shifted again. There was no ambiguity after that. The first time they slept together was on a Friday afternoon, in a private training studio. He told her he was staying late at work. I remember that day, not because anything felt wrong at the time, but because I had texted him around 6:30 asking if he wanted me to start dinner. He replied that he was stuck finishing up an event breakdown. He even sent me a picture. A table, papers, his laptop open. Proof. That same photo was in the thread. He had sent it to her first, with the caption, "Cover story." I didn't feel shock when I saw that. Shock requires surprise. This was something else. Recognition. Like seeing the full shape of something that had been casting shadows for longer than I realized. After that, the messages became explicit, detailed, coordinated, where they met, which entrances to use to avoid cameras, when to use her car instead of his, what days were safest, Mondays and Wednesdays, because those were the days I had standing regional calls. He had given her my schedule, not casually, not vaguely, specifically. Time blocks, patterns, predictability. He had turned my routine into a tool. That detail didn't just hurt. It clarified. This wasn't impulsive. It was engineered. By the time I reached message 600, something shifted again. Not in them, in me. Because up until that point, I could have still told myself a version of this story where it was just physical. A mistake that escalated. A boundary crossed too many times. But then I saw it. "I think I'm falling for you," Elena wrote. There was a pause in the thread after that. Long enough that I checked the timestamps twice. 3 hours. Then Marcus replied, "I already did." I didn't react. Not outwardly. But something inside me went quiet in a way I had never experienced before. Not numb. Not broken. Just off. Like someone had flipped a breaker and shut down everything unnecessary. They talked about the future after that. Not in concrete plans, but in suggestions. Him saying he wanted more time with her. Her saying she felt alive when she was with him. They talked about trips they could take. How things would be simpler if certain complications didn't exist. I knew what those complications were. I didn't need it spelled out. There were messages sent from our house. From our bedroom. Timestamps that lined up with nights he rolled away from me, saying he was tired. I remember one specifically. A Tuesday. He had turned his back to me and said he had an early morning. At 11:47 p.m., he sent her a message. "I wish I was with you instead." She replied, "Soon." I read that one twice. Then I kept going, because stopping would have meant sitting inside that moment. And I wasn't done collecting information. When I reached the end of the thread, I didn't feel the way I expected to. There was no explosion, no collapse, just a kind of cold clarity that settled in and stayed there. I checked the rest of the phone. No other threads like that. No other secrets. Just her. That made it worse, because it meant this wasn't chaos. It was focus, intent, a second relationship, not something that happened, something that was built. I took screenshots of everything, every message, every timestamp. Then I emailed them to myself, organized, documented, the same way I would handle any critical failure. After that, I powered the phone off and placed it back exactly where I had found it. Zipper closed, position unchanged, no trace that it had been touched. At that point, I had 2 options. Confront him immediately, or move quietly. I chose quiet. By 4:30 p.m., I was sitting in my car outside a divorce attorney's office. I didn't tell anyone why I was there. I didn't rehearse what I was going to say. I just walked in. Her name was Laura Bennett. Mid-50s, calm, direct, the kind of person who doesn't waste time on unnecessary emotion. She asked me for a summary. I gave her one. Found a second phone, 847 messages. Ongoing affair with his personal trainer. Explicit content. Shared assets. No children. She didn't look surprised. She asked practical questions. Is the house jointly owned? Yes. Both names on the mortgage? Yes. Joint accounts? Yes. Any prenup? No. I told her I had documentation. She nodded once. Good, that matters. She explained what separation would look like. Temporary arrangements, financial boundaries, filing timelines. Then she asked the question I had already answered in my head. Are you sure? I didn't hesitate. I read everything. She held my gaze for a second longer than necessary. Then she nodded again. All right. She started drafting paperwork that same afternoon. I paid the retainer without thinking twice. On the drive home, I didn't feel calm. Not peaceful, but steady. Like a decision had been made, and everything after that was just execution. At 5:02 p.m., Marcus texted me. Running a little late. Elena pushed me hard today, lol. I stared at that message longer than I should have. The casualness of it. The layered lie. The way he had embedded truth inside deception so naturally it didn't even look like effort. I typed back 2 words. Sounds good. Then I picked up dinner. When I got home, I set the takeout containers on the counter like any other night. Then I placed the envelope in the center of the kitchen island. Not hidden, not dramatic. Just there, waiting. Marcus walked in at 6:18 p.m. Same as always. Gym bag over his shoulder. Light sweat still on his neck. That familiar, easy energy he carried into every room, like nothing in the world had shifted. He kissed me on the cheek. Hey, traffic was insane. I nodded once like I normally would. Foods on the counter. Everything about the moment was routine. Predictable. Exactly the way he had described me in those messages. Then he saw the envelope. It took less than a second for something in him to register that it didn't belong. His body went still. Not frozen completely, just held. Like he had stepped onto something unstable and hadn't decided whether to move or retreat. What's that? He asked. I didn't raise my voice. Open it. There was a pause. Then he set his gym bag down slowly, like sudden movements might trigger something worse, and picked up the envelope. He slid the papers out. His eyes scanned the first page. Confusion came first. A slight crease between his brows. Then recognition. His jaw tightened. Then panic. This isn't funny, he said. I met his eyes. I agree. He looked back down at the papers, flipping to the second page like he was hoping the context would change. It didn't. What is this about? He asked, but there was already something defensive in his tone. I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence sit long enough that he had to fill it. Then I said 2 words. Your gym bag. That was it. That was the moment everything shifted. His eyes flicked, not to me, but toward the laundry room. A small movement. Barely noticeable, but involuntary. And that told me everything I needed to know. He looked back at me, and for a second there was nothing there. No performance. No strategy. Just recognition. Then it started. The laugh came first. Sharp. Quick. Not because anything was funny, but because he needed time. You went through my stuff, he said. Teresa, that's insane. That's what, a violation? I didn't move. I was looking for my headphones. I held his gaze. I found a second phone instead. The shift was immediate. Defensive became controlled. Controlled became calculating. It's not what you think, he said. That sentence, it's almost scripted. I didn't interrupt him. I just let it hang there. Then I said, I read all 847 messages. That number landed. I watched it hit him. You could see the calculation behind his eyes collapse in real time. There was no minimizing that. No reframing. No pretending it was something small. 847 messages is not an accident. He inhaled slowly, then tried a different angle. It wasn't supposed to go this far, he said. I was going to end it. I tilted my head slightly. When? Soon. How soon? He hesitated. And that hesitation was louder than anything he could have said. I just needed time, he added. I nodded once. Another 6 months, another year? His jaw tightened. That's not fair. No, I said quietly. What's not fair is you building a second relationship while still living inside this one. That was when the tears started. Real ones. But even then, there was something measured about them. Controlled. Like he was aware of how they looked. I felt disconnected from you, he said. You've been distant. Everything is a schedule with you, Teresa. Everything is planned. He gestured vaguely. I needed something different. I let him finish. Then I asked, did that require a second phone? He flinched. Just slightly. I continued. Or using our guest bathroom to send her photos? That stopped him. Completely. For a second, there was nothing left to say. Then he pivoted again. It was physical at first, he said quickly. It didn't mean anything. I read the messages, I replied. Silence. I read the parts where you told her you loved her. Another silence. I read the parts where you said you felt alive with her. His eyes dropped. I read the parts where you called me predictable. That one landed harder. He exhaled sharply, like he had been holding that word inside himself longer than he realized. Then something changed. Not sadness. Not regret. Frustration. You're acting like you're perfect, he snapped. You're not easy to live with, Teresa. Everything is controlled. Everything is structured. I needed something spontaneous. I didn't raise my voice. Spontaneity doesn't require secrecy. He opened his mouth to respond. Stopped. closed it again. Because there wasn't a version of that argument that held up. That was the moment he understood. This wasn't a fight. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't negotiating. I wasn't asking if we could fix it. I had already moved past that point. I spoke to an attorney this afternoon, I said. His head snapped up. What? The paperwork is filed. He stared at me. You already filed? Yes. The tears stopped immediately. Just stopped, like someone had turned them off. You're seriously going to throw away 9 years over this? He asked. I shook my head once. It wasn't a mistake, I said. It was a sustained second relationship. The kitchen went quiet, completely quiet. Then he asked the question I had been waiting for. How much do you know? I held his gaze. Enough. That was all I gave him. Because the truth is, I knew everything. But saying it out loud wouldn't change anything. Then I asked him something. One question. Does Elena know you're in a committed relationship? He hesitated. Just long enough. She knows we've been having issues, he said. That wasn't the question. I repeated it. Does she know you're still living here with me? He looked down at the counter. I told her we were basically separated. We weren't. We had dinner together 3 nights a week. We hosted his parents for holidays. We refinanced the house together in March. There was nothing about our life that resembled separation. So not only had he built a second relationship, he had rewritten the first one to justify it. I nodded once. That detail mattered more than anything else. He started pacing then, running a hand through his hair. I was confused, he said. I've been feeling off for months. The gym was supposed to help. It just got complicated. I watched him. Were you ever going to tell me? He stopped moving. I don't know, he admitted. That was the most honest thing he had said since he walked in. Then he tried one last angle. We can fix this, he said. Therapy. We can go to therapy. This doesn't mean anything compared to what we have. 9 years doesn't just disappear. I let that sit for a second. Then I said very simply, 9 years didn't disappear. I met his eyes. They ended. There was a moment after I said it where the room seemed to settle. Not calm, just defined. Like everything that had been uncertain 5 minutes ago had finally taken a shape neither of us could pretend not to see. Marcus stood there, still holding the papers, like if he didn't move, the situation might somehow reverse itself. It didn't. I'll quit the gym, he said suddenly. I'll block her. I'll change my number if I have to. Whatever you want. I shook my head. You can do whatever you want, I said evenly. It just won't be as my partner. That was when the last layer dropped. The part where he thought this was still negotiable. His shoulders tightened. You're not even trying, he said. You're just ending it. I tried for 9 years, I replied. You ended it 6 months ago. Silence again. He looked at me like he was waiting for something. Anger, emotion, hesitation. Something he could work with. There was nothing there, so I made a decision. One I hadn't planned to say out loud that quickly, but once it formed, it felt obvious. You need to pack a bag, I said. He blinked. What? You need to leave tonight. For the first time since he walked in, his composure cracked. This is my house too. Yes, I said, and I'm not staying under the same roof with someone actively maintaining a second relationship. That's not, he started, then stopped himself, because even he knew that argument didn't hold anymore. You can call your sister, your parents. Elena, I continued, but you're not sleeping here tonight. His expression shifted from disbelief to anger. You can't just throw me out. I'm not changing that locks, I said calmly. I'm not denying you access to your belongings. I'm telling you that for tonight, you need to remove yourself from this space. He laughed once, sharp and bitter. This is insane. No, I said quietly. What's insane is pretending this is normal. He ran a hand through his hair again, pacing now, faster. And this is exactly what I meant, he said. Everything with you is extreme, structured, controlled. There's no room for anything real. I watched him for a second. Then I said, there was room. You filled it with someone else. That stopped him. Completely. The truth tends to do that. He looked at me like he wanted to argue, like he needed to argue. But there was nothing left to defend. After a long pause, he exhaled and looked away. Then, without another word, he turned and went upstairs. I didn't follow. I stayed in the kitchen, exactly where I was, listening. Closet doors opening, drawers sliding. The dull scrape of a suitcase being pulled out from under the bed. It took about 20 minutes. 20 minutes to reduce 9 years to what could fit into a carry-on. When he came back down, he had a suitcase in one hand, his gym bag in the other. He stopped near the door, looked at me. You're really choosing pride over us, he said. I held his gaze. This isn't pride, I said. It's standards. There was nothing else to say after that. He left without slamming the door. The house went quiet. Not empty. Just still. For the first time since I found that second phone, I could breathe without feeling like something was pressing against my chest. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was spiraling, but because my mind was still processing, reordering. Around midnight, my phone started lighting up. First Marcus, then his sister, then his mother. Call after call. I didn't answer any of them. I let everything go to voicemail. Documentation matters. At 12:17 a.m., Marcus finally texted, You're overreacting. We can fix this. At 12:24 a.m., Elena says she'll back off. She didn't know it was like this. I stared at that message for a long time, not because it changed anything, but because it confirmed something he had already told her. At 12:31 a.m., Please don't do this. I didn't respond. At 1:02 a.m., his sister sent a message. What did you do to make him feel like he needed someone else? I read it once. Then again. Then I took a screenshot. That one I forwarded to my attorney in the morning. Because it wasn't just about the message. It was about the narrative forming around it. By 7:30 a.m., I was back in Laura Bennett's office. I handed her the screenshots from the second phone. The overnight messages. Everything. She reviewed them without comment, then nodded. The faster we formalize this, the better, she said. We drafted a notice requesting temporary exclusive use of the house. Not emotional, not dramatic, just facts. Documented infidelity, emotional distress, clear reasoning. She also advised me to move half of our joint funds into a separate account, not to hide anything, but to prevent unilateral withdrawals. So I did, exactly half. Checking and savings, documented before and after. Then I sent Marcus a neutral message. I've transferred half of our joint funds into a separate account. All shared expenses will be tracked pending legal guidance. He called immediately. You're trying to bankrupt me now, he snapped. No, I said. I'm preserving stability. I could hear his sister in the background, asking what I was saying. He turned away from her voice, lowering his tone slightly. This is unnecessary, Teresa. No, I replied. This is structured. That word again. Structured. He exhaled sharply. You're humiliating me, he said. My family knows everything now. I paused. Then said, That's a consequence of bringing someone else into our relationship, not of me responding to it. There was silence on the line. Then he said something that confirmed exactly where his priorities were. Elena feels terrible. I closed my eyes briefly. Not because it hurt, because it clarified. I asked him one question. Are you with her right now? Silence. Then, no, but I might go see her later, just to talk. Just to talk. Less than 12 hours after walking out of this house, he was already considering going to her. That removed the last piece of doubt. Whatever part of me had wondered if this was something salvageable, it was gone. I opened my eyes. Any further contact with her will be noted, I said calmly. Not as revenge, as pattern. You're threatening me now, he said. I'm informing you. We hung up without resolution. That afternoon, he posted something on social media. A vague quote about choosing happiness and breaking free from control. People started reaching out, asking questions. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. Instead, I did one thing. I sent a message to Elena. Short, direct, no emotion. This is Teresa Clark. I found the second phone. The relationship is over. Legal proceedings have started. Do not contact me again. 3 minutes later, she replied. He told me you were already separated. I stared at the screen, then typed one sentence. We refinanced our house together in March. There was a long pause. Then, I didn't know the full situation. I wouldn't have gotten involved if I did. Maybe that was true. Maybe it wasn't. It didn't matter. What mattered was that everything built in secrecy was now exposed to daylight. And daylight has a way of changing things. Marcus called me less than an hour after I texted Elena. This time, he didn't try to sound calm. What the hell are you doing? He snapped the second I answered. I informed someone who was involved in my relationship, I said. You had no right to contact her. I let that sit for a second. Then I said very quietly, You had no right to involve her. Silence. Not long, but enough. You're trying to sabotage this, he said, his tone shifting from anger to something sharper. Even if we're over, you don't need to ruin what I have with her. That sentence settled something in me completely. Up until that moment, there had still been a small, almost theoretical possibility that part of him might fight for what we had, that he might understand the weight of what he had done. He wasn't. He was protecting her, not us. I didn't raise my voice. I'm not sabotaging anything, I said. I'm finalizing what you already chose. He exhaled hard into the phone. You've changed, he said. You're cold now. I don't even recognize you. I looked out the window, watching nothing in particular. I recognize myself just fine, I replied. That seemed to frustrate him more than anything else I had said. Then he played his last card. "If you push this through," he said, "I'll make this ugly. I'll tell people how you treated me, how you controlled everything, the finances, the house. I'll say you forced me out." I didn't react. I had been expecting that. "I offered temporary arrangements through council," I said. "You left voluntarily, and I have documentation of everything else." Silence again. Then, quieter this time, almost wary. "You documented everything, didn't you?" "No," I said. "I recorded facts. There's a difference." He hung up. No goodbye. No resolution. Just disconnect. By that evening, the narrative had already started to shift. Not publicly. Not dramatically. But in small ways. A mutual friend texted me. "Is it true about Elena?" I looked at the message for a second, then replied with one word. "Yes." There was a pause. Then, "I'm sorry." That was the first response that didn't try to assign blame. Didn't try to reinterpret what had already been established. Just acknowledgement. The next few days moved quickly. Not emotionally, logistically. Marcus's attorney reached out 3 days later. The tone was different. Professional, detached, focused on arrangements. They requested a scheduled time for him to retrieve additional belongings from the house. My attorney coordinated it. Everything documented. Everything controlled. No surprises. He showed up the following Saturday morning. Not alone. His sister came with him. She didn't look at me when she walked in. Marcus did. Just briefly. Like he wasn't sure what version of me he was going to find. There wasn't a version. Just me. Unmoved. "Bedroom's upstairs," I said. "Office is off limits." His sister let out a quiet scoff at that. "This doesn't have to be like this," she muttered. I didn't respond. Marcus went upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen, listening. Closet doors, drawers. The same sounds as before, but different this time. More deliberate, more final. At one point, he came halfway down the stairs. Stopped. "You really won't even consider counseling?" he asked. I looked at him. "Counseling is for people who are confused," I said. "Not for people running parallel relationships." That phrase hit him the same way it had before. He flinched slightly, then disappeared back upstairs. When he came down again, he had more bags. Boxes this time. His sister followed, carrying smaller things. She set one down harder than necessary. "You're throwing away something real," she said, not quite looking at me. I met her gaze. "No," I said calmly. "He did." She didn't respond to that, because there wasn't a response. Marcus stood near their door for a moment after everything was gathered. Like he was waiting. For what? I'm not sure. An apology. A change. Something. "I'm taking a break from Elena," he said finally. I held his gaze. "That's your decision," I replied. "It doesn't change mine." He shifted his weight. "She thinks it's too messy right now." There it was. Not remorse. Not clarity. Inconvenience. I nodded once. "That sounds like something you should discuss with her." His jaw tightened. "You really don't care?" I considered that question for a second, then answered honestly. "I care about what actually happened," I said, "not what you do after it." That seemed to land harder than anything else, because it removed him from the center of the conversation. He wasn't the decision anymore. He was the outcome. Before he left, he tried one last time. "Did you ever love me?" he asked. That question is designed to pull you backward. Into memory. Into doubt. I didn't let it. "I loved who I thought you were," I said. That was the only emotional sentence I gave him. He nodded once. Not in agreement. Just acknowledgement. Then he left. 2 suitcases, 3 boxes. No slammed door. No final argument. Just absence. After they pulled out of the driveway, I walked through the house slowly. Room by room. Closets half empty. Bathroom counters cleared. The space felt lighter. Not better. Not worse. Just defined. A few days later, I heard through a mutual friend that things between Marcus and Elena had already started to shift. Distance. Less communication. Less certainty. Apparently, she hadn't signed up to be part of something this visible, this complicated. It didn't give me satisfaction. Just confirmation. What thrives in secrecy rarely survives in daylight. Marcus texted me again after that. "I think we moved too fast." I read it once. Then again. Not we. He said he was staying with a friend now. That things with Elena were complicated. That maybe we both needed time before making anything permanent. I replied once. "The paperwork is already in motion." He responded with a single word. "Please." I didn't answer, because by then there was no ambiguity left. Only pattern. And patterns don't change because someone becomes uncomfortable. The hearing for temporary orders happened a month after I found the second phone. There was no courtroom drama. No raised voices, no sudden confessions. Just a conference room, a long table, neutral walls, fluorescent lighting that made everything feel more procedural than emotional. Marcus sat across from me, not close enough to feel familiar, not far enough to feel like a stranger. Just separate. He looked different, not broken, but unsettled, like someone who had miscalculated and was still trying to figure out where. His attorney spoke first, a controlled narrative, carefully constructed. They framed it as emotional distance, said we had grown apart, that Marcus had felt unsupported, isolated, that the relationship had lost something essential. They didn't mention the phone, or the messages, or Elena. They didn't need to. Because my attorney didn't argue emotion. She presented documentation. Clean, structured, chronological, screenshots, timestamps. The message with the cover story photo. The scheduling around my work calls. 847 messages, reduced to evidence. The mediator read through everything in silence. Marcus didn't look at me. Not once. When it was his turn to speak, his voice was quieter, measured. I never meant to hurt anyone, he said. It started as something professional. It just blurred. Blurred. I didn't react. Because confusion doesn't require planning. It doesn't require a second phone. It doesn't require infrastructure. The mediator closed the folder after a few minutes. Her recommendation was simple. Temporary exclusive use of the house granted to me. Equal asset division to be negotiated. No spousal support requested by either side, given comparable incomes. Financial boundaries already established. Clean. Efficient. Final, in a way that didn't feel dramatic, but still absolute. Outside the building, Marcus caught up to me before I reached my car. You really documented everything, he said. Yes. He studied me for a second. You didn't even yell, he added. There was something in his tone. Not admiration. Not quite regret. Something closer to confusion. I met his gaze. Yelling doesn't change facts, I said. He nodded slowly, then looked away. Elena's been distant, he said after a moment. Things are different now. I didn't respond. Because that wasn't part of this conversation. He shifted again, searching. And maybe I made decisions too quickly, he added. I let that sit for a second, then asked him one question. If I hadn't found the phone, would you still be with her? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I nodded once. That was enough. I got in my car and left. That night, I did something small, something practical. I removed the bed frame from the guest room, the room where secrets had been stored, the room where lies had been constructed. I cleared it out. Turned it into an extension of my office. Clean desk. Neutral space. No reminders. A few days later, the noise around everything started to fade. Friends stopped asking questions. The narrative settled. There was nothing left to speculate about. Marcus and Elena didn't last. I heard that through the same quiet channels, everything else came through. 6 weeks after the hearing, they ended. Apparently, the reality of being with someone who had just dismantled a long-term relationship wasn't as appealing as the version they had built in secrecy. That didn't surprise me. It just confirmed what I already understood. Some things only exist under certain conditions. Remove those conditions. They collapse. Marcus sent one final message before the paperwork was finalized. I don't think she was the point, he wrote. I think I just didn't want to feel ordinary. I read it twice, then replied with one sentence. Ordinary would have been honest. He didn't respond after that. The final decree was signed just under 4 months after I found the second phone. No trial. No last-minute reversals. Just signatures. Documents. Closure that didn't feel like an ending. Just a conclusion. We sold the house. Split everything cleanly. I moved into a smaller place across town. Closer to work. Less space. Fewer rooms to echo. The last time I saw Marcus in person was at the closing appointment. Neutral space. Conference table. Pens lined up like tools for something mechanical. He looked at me before we signed. I thought you'd fight for me, he said. I met his eyes. I did, I said. I just didn't compete. He nodded, like he understood. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. When everything was signed, we stood up at the same time. No hug. No promises. No attempt to redefine what was already over. Just distance. Final. A few months later, I ran into Elena by accident. A grocery store. She saw me first. I knew because her posture shifted before I even recognized her. She nodded. I nodded back. No words. No confrontation. No need. She didn't look like a villain. Just someone who stepped into something without understanding the full cost. And me, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel broken. I felt clear. Clear that 847 messages is not confusion. Clear that secrecy is not a mistake. It's structure. And structure means intent. If there's anything I learned from all of this, it's simple. You don't scream when you find the second phone. You read all 847 messages. Then you make a decision. and you follow through.